So welcome everyone to this panel discussion focusing on galleries, kind of where they're at now, where they've been. I'm going to ask each of our guests, KJ Freeman, Rob Hult, and Heather Hubbs, to give a very brief description of their gallery or organization and their role within it, and then move on to questions from both me as the moderator and especially from all of you in the audience. And if you could please type your questions for our guests in the Q&A function. That would be great, because it's really you all who this is for. I'm hoping tonight's discussion will shed light on both questions that students and alumni might have for the commercial gallery sector, regardless of civilization-altering pandemics, and but as well as on changes and shifts that are part of our current reality, and changes and shifts that we anticipate for when this turns whatever corner it is, when vaccines are available, etc. I invited our guests tonight because they work more primarily with emerging artists and art and artists, and can speak to the challenges of creating opportunities for awarded work to get shown and represented, but can also speak to other strategies for creating visibilities for one's practice. I'm also hoping that we can expand on the conversation to think about opportunities within the commercial gallery framework for graphic design, architecture, and other disciplines that RISD students and alumni work within. So I've kind of invite everyone to introduce themselves. Rob, I'll start with you as like the person on my screen who's up on the left. So.
Okay, sure. My name is Rob Hult. I'm a working artist. I work primarily in drawing, and I'm also a part owner, one of three, of Klaus von Nichtssagend Gallery in New York. The gallery started as a sort of weekend artist run space in Williamsburg, Brooklyn in 2004. And now we're on the Lower East Side, full-time operation, still three of us running it. And we currently have a group show up called Mask, which is up through the end of the month.
Heather, you're next on the Hollywood Squares kind of framework here. So.
Hi, I'm Heather Hubbs. I'm the executive director of the New Art Dealers Alliance. We're a nonprofit member-based organization. We're a 501c6. So our members are made up of people who work with contemporary art, primarily galleries, and but it could also be, we have other members are people like art advisors, or pretty much anybody working with contemporary art in a professional way could be a potential member of the organization. And we do programming for our members year round. And we do lots of things, but because the art fairs are so big and they get the most attention, a lot of people sort of think that we're a fair company, but we're actually first and foremost a gallery association. And yeah, that's it.
Awesome. KJ.
I'm the owner and founder of Housing Gallery. We opened up in 2017 in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. It's a bit of a hybrid space. I think teeters between a commercial gallery and also has a non-for-profit sort of messaging. I was a performance artist before I started selling work, and I think I'm a bit of a writer now. I don't know. I'm just chilling most of the time. So.
Excellent, thanks. And I'm Dominic Molon. I'm the Richard Brown Baker Curator of Contemporary Art at the RISD Museum. I forgot to introduce myself. Just wanted to start off with like maybe the question that I think most students, at least fine art students, tend to have, at least in my experience. Frankly, a lot of artists who've been working for a long time, which is, what's the best way for an artist to really put their work in a position to be seriously considered by and shown at a commercial gallery?
I mean, should I answer that?
Sure. Or just
Well, I think that that's a little bit, you know, at the end of the day, it really just comes down to what, I mean, you could be an artist and you could put yourself out there. You could network, you could go to openings, you could go to shows, you could apply to residencies, which residencies are a great place for potential dealers, gallerists, curators, to see your work. So residencies are always a good place to start. You know, there's Abram Center. I've seen artists through supposedly we're not supposed to do this, but I do it. I don't care. You know, like when you do juries and you see work, ISP, Skohegan, Oxbow. I mean, there's just like a ton of certain residencies that you should apply to that put you on the radar of galleries. And also, unfortunately, MFA programs as well are a good place to network. I think MFAs are more of a networking thing than it has to really do with like honing in on your craft. It's just putting you in a new network of people who can show and see your work. So,
I mean, are there any things like, you know, kind of how effective are like websites, social media, that sort of thing in terms of, you know, kind of placing your work in those kinds of formats? Or
I think social media has definitely been, I mean, for the last 3 days, not 3 days, but 3 years has been a huge part of nothing. I mean, it's actually been longer than 3 years. I'd say like maybe for the last 6 years, has been a huge part of how people have been able to engage with and see work. But I think it depends on like what gallery, you know, like I necessarily am not a fan of social media. Like I like to find artists through other artists. I like to meet artists at openings. I like to go to BFA shows. I like to go to MFA shows. But there are other galleries that solely thrive off of the social media economy. So they will definitely look at hashtags of painting or contemporary painting or like African American art. And that's you know, so there's a couple of, you know, even friends of mine, that's how they find the artists they show. So you could go that route, but I think that it depends on what type of gallery that you want to be working with. You know, do you want to be working with like a gallery that's really about pushing the work and selling the work to whomever and, you know, whoever, or do you want to be working with like a little bit more of a academically dense gallery, or like a gallery that has more I think integrity is not a fair word, because I don't think people who show work solely off of social media have no integrity, but I'm saying is a little bit more tapped into some type of institutional credibility. So that's how I feel.
Rob, you mentioned you have a group show up now. I mean, I'm kind of curious as to, you know, often galleries will do summer group shows. I'm wondering the degree to which, you know, galleries have, you know, picked up artists from those kinds of opportunities where it's not so much, you know, it's a show that kind of has, you know, a number of people in it, but maybe, you know, someone stands out, or how is that, you know, is that something that you've, you know, encountered or experienced, or has come out through what you all do?
Absolutely. And I think, you know, group shows, different galleries do them at different times. And I think you can look at a gallery's programming that might do a lot of group shows or none. And I think year to year it might change too, but it is a great way to, like, if you have a theme, to, you know, bring in a couple different artists that the gallery's been looking at, or that you've been doing studio visits with, and see, you know, how it goes working with them, and you know, what kind of response work we'll get in a show, and, you know, how it functions in the conversation generally as a part of the show, but in your gallery and how people perceive it. So we've often had artists in group shows and then really liked their work and liked working with them and just had a generally positive experience, and so brought them into the program like as a direct result of that. And I think if you look at artists' CVs overall, you'll often see like a group show that precedes a solo show at galleries. I think that's a pretty common occurrence.
Heather, I'm wondering, have you had, I think at NADA, any instances where you've kind of worked directly with artists? I think we are kind of familiar with NADA as, I mean, and I know it's, as you said, not just something that produces fairs, but what ways has NADA kind of engaged directly with artists and creating, opportunities that sort of fall out within or between or outside of a commercial gallery kind of opportunity?
Well, we've done different collaborations with artists. We do usually try to make those collaborations be with members, like artists who are showing with member galleries.
Uh-oh.
Oh no!
Heather, your connection's a little
Oh no.
frozen.
Am I frozen?
A little bit.
All right, I may move.
Okay.
Let me move. I'm gonna just stop my video because I think my connection's bad in here.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to kind of open some considerations as to, there are just the very foundational sort of how one kind of starts, how one gets a sort of foothold into a world that can seem, opaque, sometimes intimidating. We've brought work in by artists who who came out of RISD, who have told me I am terrified of like putting myself out there and kind of being within that kind of grind, that context. And so, I'm really interested in sort of kind of talking through or just maybe getting started with, thinking about how you as an artist kind of can navigate those kind of early stages.
I think that like KJ made a lot of great points about like different contexts that you and your work can operate in. And, I mean, the first thing that's the most important thing as an artist is to just like find a way to make your work, which is often like sometimes the biggest uphill battle. But beyond that, like finding a support group that you're, comfortable with. And I think you can operate at a simple level as like inviting a friend over or have a, Zoom or FaceTime call in 2020 and talk about your work together. And I think like that is something that will not only help you want to make work and feed your practice, but also, keep your work in a conversation that's a little bit larger than your studio. And I think galleries often find artists through other artists.
Yeah.
And so, usually it's if you're in conversation with artists, that's usually like the best context that your work will operate in.
Heather, now that you're back, I kind of want to sort of follow up on where you got frozen.
I'm sorry, I don't know why my connection is so bad. It is bad today though.
You're talking about how you kind of work with people who are still sort of members of NADA, but kind of creating
with artist collaboration.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do some things directly with artists, but it's usually an artist who's already showing with a member gallery, just because it makes sense to keep it within the organization most of the time, or at least if it's not within a member gallery, then if it's something that we're doing surrounding an art fair, then it would make sense to do something with an artist who's being shown by someone participating in the fair.
I think one of the things that I find interesting, I think having both KJ and Rob joining us is, I think we think of it about maybe in a very linear sort of sense of like, well, you're studying at art school, you get an art degree, and an artist, you make your career in that way. But I think it's been really interesting, I think throughout, a sort of post-war art history to see how artists became, people who ran galleries and helped kind of others' careers or found their own kind of purpose and voice in that way. And just wanting to hear from you all in terms of like how that path kind of got started with the, what you would sort of advise people who maybe are thinking towards that of like, oh, maybe this might be something that plays to my ability to kind of, do something beyond just being an artist, which is not nothing new. It's just being an artist.
Well, I originally had. Sorry, I have a stuffy nose right now, so I sound a little bit strange. But when I was 23, I had this epiphany that I was working at the New Museum at that time, and then I was like a visitor services person, and then I got introduced to Amanda Palmer, who was at ICI, I think a little bit ago, to do the R&D sessions at the New Museum. And so when I was a performance artist, I was really interested in systems, and particularly like internet systems or Dadaism and social media. But I realized that, this is like, I think there's a couple of like really well-known curators that I've met who transitioned into, they were artists and then they became curators, because there's this moment that you have where you realize, I don't have the mind of an artist. And saying I don't have the mind of the artist, I'm speaking really about like material, like I understand painting, I understand sculpture, and those are kind of the things that actually give me, I think, an advantage than most, that give me advantage than most, like gallerists or dealers. But there's also like, do I have the skill set to actually apply? And I always noticed that my brain would just be too sucked up into the conceptualization of everything, and it would fall flat, and it wasn't a good piece, or it was too concerned with all these other things that I never knew how to edit my work accordingly. But then also I realized I liked other people's work more than my own, which is that's not really a character of an artist. Like, artists love other artists' work, but they also love their work just as much. And I always felt like any work that I made, any performances that I did, even Devin Kinney, who's an artist I show, put me in a performance when I was like 24. And it was cool and it was fun, but I always like seeing other people's work more than my own. And I don't know if that's answering the question, but it's just that there needs to be facilitators, and there's something known as like pillar people, right? So there are these people who always are able to sort of like connect the dots or facilitate something. And these are, I think, really important people in the, all kinds of different economies, all kinds of different industries, especially in art. And it's definitely, I don't know, not an ego death, because it's like at the end of the day, there's definitely the personality of a dealer or the personality of the curator, but you have to really think less about yourself in terms of your own programming. So it's like, whenever an artist comes into my space, it's their show. It doesn't really matter what I want to do. It doesn't matter what type of course I want to make. It's definitely a collaboration, but at the end of the day, it's the artist's show. And that's, I think that's a character trait of like a person that transitions out of being an artist into a curator, a dealer. They're the same word, to be honest, but yeah, I don't know. I hope that answers the question.
It does. No, and I think I think it's, you know, there tends to be I think not enough. I mean, you know, it's a relationship that I think gets developed with artists over a number of years, you know, and is really, I think, incredibly important in terms of not only kind of serving as a facilitator, serving as an intermediary, but also, you know, the way that galleries function as, you know, repositories of information, as the place where I would go as a curator to find out more about an artist that I want to, you know, acquire for the museum. So I'm curious, I had a really great intern this summer who wasn't a fine art student, but a graphic design student, and asked him, you know, if he could think of some questions that he would kind of have for this situation, this panel. And it led me to, in talking with him, think about how you all engage with, you know, kind of aspects of graphic design, aspects that feed into the kind of things that folks study here, architecture, the sort of way that you've, you know, kind of that galleries get built out, or, you know, kind of how do you see, you know, in terms of like opportunities that folks might have coming out of RISD in ways that aren't just showing at a gallery, but I think graphic design in particular for me often has a really incredible effect on how, you know, the style that people associate with a gallery. KJ, our director, really loved your website. And I think,
really?
yeah, and I think those things matter. I think, you know, I always tell people, especially artists who are designing websites, that, you know, I say, I don't want to sound superficial, but, you know, my desire to kind of stay with a website or really kind of move forward with it, you know, there's certain taste levels or things that, you know, maybe I sort of get stuck on if it looks kind of wonky. So, you know, how do these other kinds of things that you kind of engage with or think about, and Heather as well, in terms of Nada and you know, kind of materials that puts out and engages with, you know, how do those things play into working with folks who might be coming out of a school like RISD?
I'll say that, I mean, I went to RISD, and my cohort, a lot of us moved to New York in the early 2000s. And when my colleagues and friends started the gallery, we needed a lot of help. And so we called our friends who were architecture majors, and they helped us like design a space and build walls and make furniture. And we called our graphic design friends from the graphic design departments, and they helped us design websites. And one of my partners worked as a graphic designer for ArtForum. Her name's Ingrid Kennedy, for many years before she started the gallery. So she has a background in graphic design too, which has helped us a lot in like book making and catalogs and web design, stuff like that. So there's a lot of collaboration with people in other areas and art gallery, and you'll see a lot of especially collaborations with graphic designers and architects and furniture designers too.
And Heather,
I'm sorry.
so go ahead.
I feel like I'm like afraid to talk because I feel like it's going to freeze up. Yeah, I mean, we work with graphic designers. We need a brand and we need a website, and we have lots of materials that we print and publish, but also we send out emails to our members and emails to our public. And so we're always, we actually have graphic designers on retainer year round, and we use them, you know, a lot. And we've used different ones over the years. The ones we have now, I think we've had them the longest, and they're definitely like the most controversial graphic designers we've ever worked with. You know, they obscure text and important pieces of information with their graphic design, which drives some people crazy, but kind of looks good. So it's, you know, it's a fine line of letting them do their job and trying to get them to do what you need them to do. And it's for us, for NADA, it's kind of the same with architects. We don't really work with architects outside of the fairs, but we do work with an architect to design the fair, and it's a similar thing, you know, what architects want or when they want to get creative. Sometimes it's not something that would really work well for the galleries, and so there's always, you know, dialogue around that. And actually, in terms of the fairs, our graphic designers and our architects work together as a team on certain elements, which makes a lot of sense because you might design something architecturally that then has signage on it, something like that. So that's something that was actually kind of new to me when I started working with NADA. I formerly at Art Chicago, when I was worked on that fair, I don't remember that relationship between graphic design and architecture happening before, but it makes a lot of sense.
I want to remind our audience that they can and should and please should submit questions for the panelists in the Q&A or chat section. You know, I've got a lot of questions, but I would rather hear from you guys because, you know, yeah. I guess, you know, this is maybe a tricky question to ask, but I'm going to try to ask it. You know, the people who buy art are folks that you all kind of engage with. I'm curious as to, you know, who these people are, what students might need to know about them. You know, they're obviously people who have the means to, you know, buy art, but I don't know. Are there things that, in terms of, you know, your experience in working in galleries or working with galleries or at art fairs, that are things that, you know, you would sort of, you know, would have liked someone to have kind of informed you about, or things that you've learned in terms of how one kind of interfaces with, or what the expectations are of that relationship with collectors?
You know, I think that everything is always in flux in relationship to collectors or the market. You know, I think what is a golden rule that I've always been told, and a couple of my friends who own galleries, is to always be wary of flippers and to always build. What I've always learned with the artists that I've worked with is to build some sort of infrastructure around them, so that if they do have like a massive moment, it won't just be like a flash in the pan, you know? And so how to navigate that is like a bit of a dance, you know? It's like, there's no really clear cut, concrete ways of doing it, but each iteration or each step, you learn a new thing about it. I've weirdly enough, I've sold to like not a ton of people, but I've sold to enough of people to maintain my programming. And, you know, I've never had any work put on auction. I've never had, you know, from an artist that I've shown, but these were kind of research-based decisions, you know. You definitely want to place work with people at institutions who are on the board. You want to place work with people who, my favorite person to place work with is someone who you can kind of teach to be a collector and isn't really interested in the work of art as an asset, but more than loving that piece of art. And so that, you know, those are ways that I navigate it.
And just to kind of translate in terms of flippers,
Yeah.
you know, I think you're kind of alluding to folks who, you know, buy work by artists who have a certain trajectory.
Yeah.
You know, like they'd be flipping a house, like flip the work to monetary gain, but don't have a real sincere kind of investment in longevity of the artist's career and so forth. Yeah.
Which was a huge problem during the sort of internet group, or the internet, you know, post-internet boom. And then also is a huge issue with Black art right now.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, it's a little bit I think it's a little bit more detrimental to Black artists, especially Black artists who do not come from any sort of money, to just be kind of inflated and ballooned up, and then might crash and might not really have a career in the next like 5 years. So it's, I mean, you can only wait and see what happens, you know, but I hope people have enough skills or intuition to know that, like, just because someone gives you a lot of money up front doesn't mean that they're not going to make a lot of more money on your back. And that's a huge issue with Black art right now. You know, people aren't making as much money as they think they should versus how much money people are going to make off of their work.
Yeah. There is a question regarding artist residencies. What people do you feel would be best as references?
I think that I wasn't in a studio art program, you know, but I think, you know, maintaining good relationships with your teachers who tend to have relationships with residency centers because they've applied. Or like one artist that I work with all the time is Basira Khan, and she always has, you know, some sort of relationship to a residency program, and any of her students, you know, at Bennington or Parsons, if she, you know, if they maintain a good relationship, that's a good person to go through. So any former professors, any internships, any artists that you, if you're an artist assistant, you know, those are good ways to navigate that.
And I'll just add to that. I think it's helpful to go, if there's a specific residency that you're interested in, like do some research on the residency, and they often publish online, you know, who's done the residencies. So it can be helpful to look through, see who's done it. Maybe one of them was your teacher, as you know, and you can reach out to them. It's helpful to have somebody that's been there and that knows the program and that is known by the residency too.
I can also, you know, if y'all don't mind, I feel like if you get someone who really sincerely you had a, you know, kind of strong you know, working relationship with, who really you know, you can trust, regardless of, I think, you know, kind of maybe you know, I think the thing that I found always very interesting is you're always kind of surprised at who knows who within this world. It's not necessarily, you know, in my experience, it wasn't necessarily the big name critic that I went to grad school with. It was the much lesser known person who had oceans more cred, where it really counted. And so, you know, and it was actually the person with whom I had the much, you know, better relationship and rapport, and how I probably learned much more from anyway. So the question for everyone, and I'm going to kind of start with Heather, because aside from just not being able to go to galleries, I think where I've found the most interesting kind of shift, the question is, how has COVID changed the industry, and do you think it'll go back to the way it was? Because I found the experience of going to art fairs really fascinating online, in terms of there being greater transparency of pricing, and being better able to kind of know kind of across the board, and without having to have, like, you know, the kind of awkward stop and chat with the dealer, like, you know, so, you know, this is Heather, I'm going to start with you in terms of how you know, the sort of situation we've been in since March has changed not only, you know, Nada and your sort of experience, but maybe how you've even observed it in galleries that you work with, or other folks.
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, it's been a big shift for us. Nada never really did anything online before COVID hit. Like, it was not something that was really appealing to us. And the first thing we did in response was FAIR, which was a shared financial model structure event online, which was a good experiment. I mean, I think there were a lot of good things about it. There were a lot of problems with it. I'm glad we did it. I don't know if we do it again. Am I breaking up?
You're kind of hanging in there.
Yeah, maybe you should pass. I'm sorry. I don't know what to do about the internet.
Oh, no, it's fine.
You're fine.
Yeah, you've been all right.
Okay. So, yeah, I think I've heard across the board that the collectors are really liking the transparency with pricing. Like they like to see the price there, and I mean, across the board, we've gotten that kind of feedback. One thing I was surprised about was to hear that people, at least in terms of what we've been doing, people are making discoveries, which I thought would be a harder thing to pull off at this time. Like I feel like I keep hearing that people are like, know what they want, and there's a lot of access, and they kind of go in and they can pick and choose, and then they leave. But I guess there are still people out there who are willing to spend some time and make discoveries. I feel like the event, the Chicago Open that we did in September, which had a sales element part of it, but it was really more about promoting the shows in Chicago. And I feel like that was really great. Like I even made a ton of discoveries with that event. And, now we're heading into Miami, which is the most strange, I think, for us of all, because it's been our kind of flagship fair since the beginning. And it is a fair that people love and enjoy going to. And, it's always had good vibes. And, so not being able to do that and be there in person is definitely starting to feel very strange. But it is what it is, and I think everybody understands that. And we're I think everyone's making the best of it.
KJ.
I mean, COVID. Oh, go ahead, KJ.
Oh, well, I think that what's good about things going online, or maybe the pause of fairs, is that a lot of the things that were kind of overriding the art are kind of null now. So it's like, yes, Miami is a great fair, but also I don't have to deal with like people more interested in going to like a Lil Wayne concert at Live than seeing the art. The whole performance of luxury and wealth, I think, is teetering off, which I don't even think just gallerists or emerging gallerists like myself enjoy, but I think also collectors that I've spoken to like that too, because you get back to the art. What's the point of spending, my gallery rent is, I was very lucky, is not as expensive as other people, but there's some friends that I have where it's like $10,000, right? What's the point of spending $10,000 a month and all of your sales happen in Miami? I mean, it's just like absurd to an extent. So this is definitely a reset button. It's like, fairs definitely have been important in strengthening certain artists' careers, in developing the gallery, not developing the gallery, but putting galleries on a certain platform. Like, my first year at NADA, I had board members from tons of different institutions like coming by, which before that they would have never hopped on the G train to go to Brooklyn to see my gallery. So it definitely has a huge importance, but the fact that we're taking a pause is great because it allows us to really see what's working and what's not working in the whole economy of it.
Yeah, it's funny. What our first couple of years in NADA, we were in Williamsburg, and we would definitely have people we would meet more people in Miami than we would. Let's say we meet more New Yorkers in Miami than we would in our gallery in Brooklyn. And I think that, you know, it's I mean, COVID really has reset everything, and I think you know, fairs going online. I think things like the fair, which was kind of an experimental platform, was a really interesting way to like tool into like what a fair does or can be, because it was like almost like socialist model where, you know, everybody that made sales was all going into, a portion of it was all going to a pot and spread across all the galleries and artists, which was a really, really cool way to try and like, you know, tool into the commercial art market. I think when there's like fairs trying to adjust their model over and over again, like all the fairs around the world going online, you know, one after the other, I think it can be overwhelming for people because it's just so much work that's being converted. And I personally really miss looking at art in person. You know, I remember going to my first show this summer after being in quarantine and being like, you know, seeing physical art again just like kind of washed over me. And it really does make a huge difference experiencing work in person and being in a situation socially, you know, in the context with other people, like being a part of this collective experience. And I think fairs are great for that. And so we're going to commercial galleries, so, or non-commercial galleries.
Yeah, no, I feel like it's been there's been a bit of a trade-off. You know, on the one hand, you know, what KJ says is absolutely, you know, correct. I've found that like going to fairs, it's often a little bit more about like people ask, what have you seen? I'm like, well, I've seen a lot of people, but seeing the work has been more challenging. And so it has, you know, being online has offered it this sort of one-to-one sort of relationship between yourself and a artwork that maybe isn't quite part of the spectacle and theater of being at a fair. But I also do respect that, you know, the art world does run. And I think in terms of being a young artist and cracking into the art world, there is a social component to it. There is you know, sometimes like, you know, chance encounters or the kinds of things that a social situation like an art fair or a gallery opening or something like that, you know, drinks at a bar afterwards does like kind of wind up being a sort of accelerant or a catalyst in terms of, you know, things, you know, kind of happening with one's career. I'm going to try and seam together a question that has some very practical sort of things, which I think is good. Okay, sorry. How many pieces do we show a gallery? Should all our work have the same feel or theme? When familiarizing a gallery or museum with one's work, is sending hard copy photos, resume with a self-addressed envelope an ancient practice people don't use these days? Or is it better to send somebody real online through email?
Is this someone who's submitting their work to see if a gallery wants to show them?
Mm-hmm.
I'd say never do that.
Okay.
I mean, it really depends on who you're sending to. Like, I'm one of those people where I'll look at it, but most people, if you send a PDF of your work to a gallery, like a cold call, they will not even care to really look at you. But you know what? Actually, I'll take that back. Do whatever you think is best, but do know that certain things will turn certain people off. And that's one of the things that will turn people off. I don't know why. I think that artists should be able to walk into galleries and show their work and get shows. I think it's a very 80s model, and it's really old school, and I love it. But there are definitely galleries who will not, you know, appreciate that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think there are galleries that do open calls, and especially nonprofits have, you know, open. You can submit your work for some of their platforms, and some even will have a curator talk to you. The Drawing Center used to do that. I don't know if they still do, but I think, yeah, sending your work out into the ether to a bunch of galleries, it doesn't really help contextualize it for the gallerists. They're often not really, they're looking at their work, but there's not necessarily like an understanding of what's going on. And as I said a little earlier, like probably the best thing to do is show your work to other artists and keep it in conversation with people that you know and respect. And if you have that conversation going, you can start to expand it, and see where it can go. But I think directly approaching galleries and putting your work in front of them, I think it's not impossible, but it's a tough proposition. And I think if you want to do that, go to the gallery first and get to know the program. Go for a couple years, like not one show, like get to know them and their program and like be around. Then you'll be more familiar. Then you'll have some context for like, hey, would it be okay if I show you my work sometime, rather than just a cold, out of nowhere.
Yeah, I think one of the things that, especially, I think something that's changed in the like 25 years that I've been doing this is when, it used to be getting like one announcement in the mail and that's how you know about a show. Now it's like, you get the opening in 2 weeks and then opening tonight and then the still open and the you get maybe 4 or 5, this talk is happening, like 5 or 6 announcements in your email per show. As an artist, submitting to like a museum curator or someone running a gallery, you're kind of having to fight through all of that other stuff that's already kind of in people's, that people are trying to kind of process and get clear of. And so, I think to y'all's point, I think I've always, sort of suggested that, it's, it is really, I think, a kind of honoring the sort of person-to-person sort of thing, or finding a way through either direct personal sort of engagement or, that you kind of find links where you can, or sort of route things through familiar channels, instead of, just kind of dropping a bomb and hoping it, kind of produces something. So.
And also know what galleries you're submitting to. Like, you have to know the difference between an emerging gallery, a blue chip gallery, a mid-tier gallery. You have to have realistic expectations for what you want. You can't just it does happen. Artists get out of school and then all of a sudden they have a solo show at the Whitney and then all of a sudden they're showing at Paradin. Like, these things do happen, but it's not for most people. Yeah. So it's like, one thing that I think is great about my gallery is that a lot of people have started at my space, but it's because I was the only one they could really approach. So it's like, approach emerging galleries, approach emerging dealers, because these people are going to actually, give you the time of day to listen to you. Don't think you could just send an email to David Zorner and then all of a sudden you're like the next Oscar Morello. That's just not how it works. So facilitating community is a huge part of it as well.
Yeah. Something I want to maybe kind of throw to Heather, because we know each other from Chicago. Something that I find NADA did for Chicago galleries especially was create different clienteles, different channels of opportunity and access to folks. The question is, do you find artists and galleries working much more decentralized and located in places other than in the major art cities? I'm curious in terms of, Heather, I think a lot of the galleries that, are in NADA aren't always from, the sort of centers. They're from, kind of interesting places beyond, like Milwaukee or Detroit or, other places. But I'm also curious the way that, maybe COVID will kind of push things out of a center, but also just the sort of platforms of, more digital access, whether that's had a role to play in not just having everything kind of come out of like 1 or 2 or 3 big kind of places.
I mean, I don't know yet. I don't know that I've seen a big shift yet from like, people kind of decentralizing entirely. I think it's definitely easier to do that in this climate. I think because you don't have to travel. People are more willing to like look at things online, and they don't have to, it's like, oh, I'm going to go to Kansas City to see this gallery, or, they can look at them digitally, and they're more open to doing that, maybe because you're just doing that so much. Is that kind of what you meant? Like, I'm just not sure if I understood the question exactly.
I mean, I think it's, can one, I'm interpreting it as, can one, kind of develop a thriving art career and not have to, move to New York or,
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, I feel like New York right now is in a very precarious situation in so many ways. I mean, it was ragingly expensive pre-COVID, and it's not really any different. And there's no messaging about what's happening with commercial rent, and that's going to be a massive determining factor in the future of the city. I mean, it's even before COVID, like 10 years, 15 years before COVID, it's getting harder and harder to be a creative individual in this city. And COVID could destroy that if they don't make some smart decisions and, introduce commercial rent stabilization, for one thing, which actually isn't unnormal. It used to exist. I didn't know this until recently, but it used to exist. And I can't remember the year in which they got rid of it, but it's not like that long ago. And it's all about the money that the city makes from these commercial developers. It's just sort of sickening when you see what's happening now, like how bad it could possibly get. But I do feel like, that people keep asking me, like, what do you think that, how are the galleries going to fare through this? And I'm always like, I don't know. What are they going to do about rent?
Yeah.
Some people are paying it. Some people aren't. Some people are paying a little bit. Like, when it comes time to pay, are they going to have to pay? Are they going to have to pay it all? Like, is there going to be any, I mean, it's just such a messed up.
Can I add one thing to that? But if you get a real estate agent and you say, I need an artist studio, you'll see a huge difference between if you say, I need an artist studio and I need a gallery space. So like the real estate agents out here, they pretty much will be like, okay, gallery, I know you're selling Basquiat's for $1.2 million. Like, that's how their brain goes that quick to think that there's that amount of money coming into the space, when for most emerging galleries, hell to the F no, that's not happening at all. But like that, I mean, it's really an issue about the real estate in the city. And I think that unfortunately, it's gonna have to burst for there to be some sort of stabilization. So.
Yeah.
I'm going to squeeze one last question in. We're just about at time. I've been curating shows in a small project. I loved it, but found that I had trouble keeping good boundaries with artists. I'm still storing artwork for artists from a show 8 months ago, etc. What would be some advice were I to keep going forward? This is an artist. What?
Does that ever stop? Like,
that's everybody.
Yeah.
Okay.
15 years.
Okay. What would be some advice for you to keep going forward? This is an artist curator working on a small scale. Continue to make work curating on the side, though I have no longer with my contract position. Appreciate your candor.
You send them an invoice for storage. I mean, no, that's a joke. That's mean. But what in the first year of my programming, things would happen where I was like, is this really how it works? And then I hear from the grapevine, like, oh, this really famous dealer is sending invoices, or this is what blue chip galleries do. Production costs, how sometimes blue chip galleries will take, like, if they give you money up front to produce a work, they'll take the money out of the sales. Like, these things happen. So every artist, especially, artists I've been working with recently, I tell them straight up, you need to understand that you're not just going to be given a velvet carpet and let in with a velvet robe and not have to actually pay back, or, the gallery doesn't have to balance their books in some way. So the good boundaries is, hey, we're cool, we're friends, but I need to let you know this is not how it works everywhere else, and you should be grateful for that. I don't do the whole, every artist that comes into my space is a genius. I don't do that. I don't see why people do it. If I'm spending rent on fares and shipping and storage and all this, you need to understand that, like, at the end of the day, we have to have a working relationship that's beneficial to the both of us. And it can't just be like ushering in, in a limousine. That's just not how it works. That's just my personal feelings on it, to be honest. But
yeah, I think like communication is the name of the game, and it's like any relationship, like artists and curators and dealers, like you really just want to like make sure the channels of communication are open and that you're just honest with each other about your own needs, and that you can come to an agreement on how the situation will work. Those boundaries can get fuzzy because friendships get involved. Hopefully if you work with people for a long time, there's some love there. But communication, like any relationship, you have to talk things out.
True. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a unique thing about the gallery business is that businesses, you always have relationships in business, but I don't know of any other business where it is so personal sometimes. And so, it can be such a long relationship, and there can be so many, you're social, you're doing business. It's like art. I don't know. There's so many levels of the ways in which your relationship can develop or not, but it's like a family kind of, and it's I'm not sure that maybe some restaurants are like that. I don't know, but it seems a little different with artists.
Well, I just wanted to say, one of the things that I've tried to do and will continue to try to do as the RISD Museum Contemporary Curator is really be available to help students and alumni with, whatever I can do knowledge-wise with helping kind of navigate the art world or be introduced to it or what have you. And I really want to thank our three panelists tonight for answering these questions, helping us kind of get a sense of where things are at, where things have always been, and how you all can hopefully get a foothold and kind of flourish. So Heather, KJ, Rob, thank you all so much. Thanks everyone for participating tonight, submitting really great questions. Yeah, thanks, and be safe, mask up.
Yeah.
Social distance.
Thanks for having me. Sorry for the terrible connection.
No.
I should have stayed here the whole time. Jarvis was being so loud, and so I sent him to his room finally.
Oh, we all.
Thank you everyone for joining.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for coordinating as well.
Bye, Rob.
Bye bye. See you
Bye.
guys.